All right, welcome. It is our 8th class for the Living Your Design workshop. Today is our final class. It's been quite a journey together. Boy, we started a long time ago. This is probably the longest running LYD I've ever done with your patients, of course. And so we're going to oh, that's a good question, Ginger. I just saw your question about how long will the recordings be available for download. Well, it's up to life, right? What we plan, what we hope, what we try to do. And you sent this to me privately, but it's a really good question for everyone. And that is that you should be able to have them available, for forever. But I am going to go through this at the end, but in case you're not here for the very end, I just want you all to know that what happens is it stays within our records for you, and we move access to them to just instead of it being under current programs or current classes, it'll be under older. It goes into sort of the archives for under your profile. So you should be able to have access for a long time. However, my experience is with technology is I just don't take that for granted. I typically download them and then again know that it's almost like having a backup. Do you know what I mean by that, everyone? Just to make sure, because there has been times when servers were changed and things were sort of that I had on Jovian got kind of retired. And so I just like to have the original on my even an external hard drive, just as a backup, just in case. And you'll find through the years that whatever the old technology was, unfortunately, sometimes that will also change. I've noticed that some of the old recordings from RAW that I used to, some of the classes I took from them are no longer working with current state-of-the-art technology. It's sad, but it's true. Probably one of the reasons that sometimes we have done I guess ebooks, where we actually do sort of a transcript of some of the classes. But anyway, enough of the logistics. We'll talk about this again at the end. Hi, Cecilia. Welcome. We're just getting started. So let's go ahead and jump right into our discussion on type. That's where we left off in our last class. We were talking about type, and they're obviously referring to aura type. And today we're going to look at the ones that are in the lower row of the slide, the projector and the reflector. And so talking about projectors, one of the things obviously is I'm not a projector, I'm a generator. And so you could say that and this would be true for any type that's sort of looking in and investigating another type, we're sort of the students of that type. And I've been a student of this type since I was born because both of my parents were projectors, and I had a mother who was a very rare projector, a mental projector. My father was an energy projector, the energy coming from the solar plexus and the root. And I've had I would say probably a large percentage of my contacts growing up through family, through friends, through work, through everything that have been projectors. So I have yeah, again, I guess being the student of them, I've learned a lot about their process, and I've also been very curious about it. So when we did the changing of our slides for the standardized slides for the Living Your Design workshop, which is what I've been using, by the way, and they've been out for several years now. When we made a change, Linda Bonnell actually hosted a Living Your Design Guide kind of program for those that had already been guides. And we came together to kind of get a look at this new standard slide presentation, which was created by Ra's daughter, Sarah. And so we went through these, and when we got to this part about projectors, we had a discussion with all these, people who had been practicing their human design for a long, long time, and obviously a nice mixture of projectors and, all other types. And so I listened very carefully to the kinds of things projectors who'd really gone through a deconditioning process for a long time had to say. And so one of the questions was, what's one of the most important things to say to what we refer to as newbie, meaning new to human design projector? And what they said, I'll be sharing with you a little bit today, but also opening up the possibility you can also express your experience, of course, if you're a projector, on what it's like to be you. But there's, obviously a need to step back and consider the strategy of a projector. When you read about that in the Living Your Design workshop, I know in some cases it says you follow your strategy for, the major decisions you make in life. And it makes it sound like everything else is sort of a free-for-all. And I've watched projectors in the community for a long time, and those that have been very serious about practicing, their experiment have tried all kinds of things, tried really using their strategy for absolutely everything. And so what you start to recognize is that your strategy, of course, is not that of a manifestor. You're not here to initiate. And so it's kind of something to recognize that you're someone that is actually designed to be conditioned by another. And by that, I mean, you've got openness, and some projectors have a lot of openness. All you really need is one definition of a channel that is, as you can see mechanically, not going to define the sacral center, and you're not going to have your throat center connected directly with a flow of energy that comes from one of the motors. Now, you can have a defined throat center, obviously, but it's just not going to, it's kind of like a pure generator. You're not going to have that gearbox, that center of manifestation, supplied by an energy source that's consistent and reliable. So you will have openness. You can have a lot of definition and be a projector. You can have, again, just one channel and be a projector, but you're designed to really be here, one-on-one, to take in through your aura focus and absorbing of the energy of the other. It's basically how you're able to take that energy in and also help to kind of guide that energy. You're here to experience the energy you're absorbing from the other and to guide, how that energy is best, needing to be aligned to what's really coming from them. So you're different in the way you take in energy, but also how you transmit who you are out into the world. You're designed to be recognized, and that is one of those words that you will discover through your lifetime what that really means. I've heard lots of wonderful descriptions, some of them being, that there is a recognition through the interaction that allows you to feel you are really being seen, truly seen. And that is sometimes not communicated in words, but there is that recognition through that interaction that feels correct. And so one of the things that some of the experienced projectors shared was one of the things to be very aware of is, what is your body doing? What are you taking in? How are you experiencing the energy? And this is going to be a little tricky for those of you who we identify as energy projectors because of reasons I'll discuss when we get to looking at the kind of three variations of kinds of projectors. But starting to become aware, of what is taking place within that energetic exchange is an important part of your process. So what happens when you're not in physical contact with the other? That's, really a question, because if you're there to really take in and absorb the life force energy of the other, then that means aura to aura. And yet we have so many ways to connect with people in our society today. This online class is an example of that. And when I was to do Living Your Design workshops, when I became certified, it was a question for me on how I was going to deliver them. And I tried all kinds of different things. First of all, I see pros and cons in all kinds of ways we connect. There's pros and cons to taking a Living Your Design class just in aura. There's pros and cons to taking it in an online environment like this. What I recognized, especially because I had a lot of openness, I had, 5 centers open in my design, is that when I was going through deconditioning, I found it valuable to be taking in the information and experimenting with the information outside the scope of others' auras, so I could start to get connected to which energies, what I'm experiencing that came from me. And that can be true for a projector too at some point. It's to really be able to recognize not just who they are, who are you, as in the other, but as a reflection back to you as you're projecting what you're taking in, to also kind of recognize that there is an opportunity for you to get more in touch with what's going on within you, what your body's doing, what you're feeling, how you're in contact with the other. And when you're not physically in contact, it's kind of hard, according to these projectors, to read the energy, to really identify with what you're taking in from them, because it can come through, different frequencies. And some people say, but I can pick up things. You can. I know there's people that can pick up qualities, tones, frequencies through the voice, through all kinds of different things you can pick up. And when I talked to Ra about that, he said, well, there's always within your own reflection, your own outer authority process of remembrance of certain frequencies and how they feel. So he was never convinced that you could really read it the way you would if you were in aura. He had an open sacral. He was a manifester. So obviously that could be slightly different in his process, of course. So the reason I'm bringing this up is it could be somewhat difficult to trust what you think you're taking in over a telephone, email, online. Would those of you that are present and projectors agree with that? Just curious. I'll let you type in. And I know that Cheryl is attending today, but has may not have access to keyboard and different things, so it could be a little more challenging for her. But Pam, you're here. Anything come to mind with that? And also, Roxana, what would you say about taking in the energy of the other and being able to kind of read it? And I guess maybe what I mean by that is, I just saw your comment from Pam that after you mentioned remembering frequency, it makes me question if I really can pick up the energy over the phone. I've always felt like I could. Now I wonder. And I would just keep investigating and experimenting with that, Pam, because again, I could tell all kinds of things through my own experience listening. I always, I have a way of internalizing things over the telephone. I could feel, I could sense a connection with people over when I was over the phone, for example. You can hear tones of voice, you can kind of hear how they might be feeling about things. But what we're saying is that's different than literally taking in and absorbing the energy in a way that's going into you. It's more of an interpretation of how you're connecting through, this way. So just to kind of experience this as you start to go through your own experimental process is kind of what I'm saying. Ginger says, my 17-year-old son is a projector. He finds text and social media very stressful because he can't absolutely read the energies. And you can get a sense. We take in people and get a sense of where they're coming from, but that's different than reading the energy as it's being transmitted. So just something to think about, something to experiment with, not something to conclude about, but to start to become more aware of the possibilities that it may be more difficult to read that. It may mean that you can't literally always trust. And when it comes to invitations to some degree they're not just words. They're not just, hey, you want to go to lunch? It's more an invitation that is energetically also offering an interaction that is really allowing you to be, as a projector, seen, invited in a way that you realize the other really gets who you are, because you are putting out who you are in your own frequency. I always think of projectors kind of like butterflies that are out able to, see this energy of the other, the flowers that are out there, and they engage not with a bunch of flowers all at once, but one-on-one. And only if again, the flowers sort of open and saying, hey, over here, this is me. And only when it's really okay to penetrate the aura, because it's been invited. And so that's what you're starting to really experiment with. What is an invitation? And the energy will be available to you and offered, if it's a manifester informed, you'll be informed, you'll be initiated into the exchange. And as a reflector, maybe you'll have a different idea of how that might work once we talk about the reflector today. But the reason I bring this up is because, invitations that are fake, they're not really invitations. They're just sort of acceptable behaviors that people feel like they need to offer. They may not be real. And do you know what that feels like to have a fake invitation? And again, this is directed at those of you who are projectors. And I really recognize that in human design, in the different communities, etc., we become aware of the need for the invitation for the projector. And so sometimes people run around saying, oh, you're a projector, you must be waiting for an invitation, I'll invite you. And they run around, being manifestors, inviting projectors all over the place, rather than really coming from their true strategy and authority, but also a true recognition of you. And so that's what I meant by they don't really work. And you can feel some bitterness there if you recognize it's really not an invitation. And I watched, again, I would watch my mother interacting with people, and there was an expression on her face that she would get when she was in that mode where we refer to the the not self theme of bitterness. So let's talk about bitterness for a second. Bitterness is something you would feel, and I've watched it also become a reflection on a person's face. What are some of the words? Does that word resonate with you, Pam and Roxana? And if and is there any other word that you would also use to describe that feeling of what it's not really recognition? You have experienced it. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. Yeah. Frustration, being invisible. Uh-huh. Yeah. I've heard it's kind of instead of the sweet taste of success, it's sometimes experienced as being, this feeling of being sour. It's kind of sour. It's not sweet. It's not feeling seen, which is where I think the invisible comes from. The not good enough, not sure that that really translates into the feeling and the expression of not self. It's more that you're conditioning, and again, the number one area of conditioning can be the ego center, and you could sort of be taking on the conditioning once you're not feeling seen. And so Roxana says, yes, it's funny. Years before I knew human design, my mother would tell me, I don't know what's wrong with you and your sister. You're both so bitter. Oh my gosh, life is so true, isn't it? And you're the only projectors in your family. And gosh, so many times you're not treated like a projector. You're not raised to recognize the correctness of others recognizing you. Now, my parents, being projectors, just were always recognizing us. I mean, they really were. We grew up being recognized. My big, shockaroo was going out in the real world when the real world doesn't recognize you in the same way your parents do. Pam again says, I would say I felt like the kid who wasn't invited to the party. Crazy how the language we used before we know we we know about human design, and yet you always knew when you're born being who you are. Human design doesn't tell you anything different than who you are. And there's a part of us that still, if we really kind of get in touch with that, remember or can feel it, or it's like, yeah, you're not really telling me anything I don't already know about myself, but you're putting it into words that are pretty darn accurate. And that's what a lot of people experience with human design. So again, Pam grew up with the manifestor and 2 generators. Well, I think that all of us are exposed to, interesting ways to kind of navigate life and learn from the other. And, it's kind of cool. You were raised, maybe not so much that they don't know how to necessarily raise you or treat you from the very moment as a projector, but you're here really to study manifesting and generating energies. Isn't that what the open sacral allows? And so you're the student. I'm the student of projectors. You're the student of manifestors. You're the student of generators. You, through your lifetime of taking in all these energies of manifesting, all these energies of generating, you can learn so much about what that life is, what that life force is about. But just don't try to be it, right? So these invitations, I see them as this beautiful opportunity to be invited to dance with the other, because it's one-to-one and it's taking in the energy, but it's also being in sync with the energy. It's being able to guide it. And when you guide it, you're not controlling it. You're not telling it what to do. You're not well, and an analogy you might get to kind of get a feel for what I'm talking about is in ballroom dancing. someone is actually leading, but you really can't tell when it's really done right. And that's really kind of this new role that projectors came into the world in, 1781, pretty much when we became nine-center beings, to truly have this new way of leading, to be, this, I would say, a special being that came in with the shift from the 7 to 9-centered beings. Back in the 7-centered being era, manifestors were really ruling. I mean, there was a time, for what the 7-centered being was all about, that was the perfect thing to have. Manifestors sort of ruling, and to some degree enslaving others, being the authority of others. And by that I mean, and sometimes, the way they did that was, they people could be very afraid of them. I think even now, to some degree, manifestors, can experience people being afraid. But it's different today. Projectors came in with a different kind of place and role within leadership than, where the manifestor leadership kind of experience was important from the 7-centered world. So you're here to lead, guide, show the way, but in not a dictating kind of informing way, but in one that is sort of co-leadership. That's why we have these new leadership models in the world, right? It's not about, again, taking control. So Ginger says, is puberty, high school extra difficult for projectors? Teenagers do not appreciate subtly. Ooh, that's a good question. I guess it would vary, projector by projector. My mother was very recognized. Interestingly enough, she did not find it difficult at all. She was, extremely sought after. So it can be a wide variety. Obviously, all of us have these different experiences. But in terms of the projector being invited, it's like someone saying, "Gosh, I would love to dance with you." And then there's the invitation, then off you go, guiding the energy, because you know exactly what it's capable of, and you make the whole thing dance. It isn't a dance between the projector and the other. And when the dance is over and the energy is withdrawn, I also want to just invite you to consider it's not personal. And so many times the projector that gets hooked into the energy, that is really now kind of unable to separate from the energy, can be really liking the energy, wanting the energy, and doesn't want to let go of the energy. And that, can be felt very personally when it's when it's sort of uninvited now. So there's invitations, and then there's the withdrawing of an invitation. And it's all subtle. It's all something to recognize. And it's all something to experiment with. So when there is no invitation, what do? That's what a lot of, projectors feel. I'm waiting, there's no invitation. And actually, you just do whatever your authority is going to do. You navigate life through your authority, and then when the invitation is there, you engage with your authority again to see if it's the right invitation. So often, projectors get so, I'll say the word desperate because it can feel desperate when you're letting your mind run your life. They can be so desperate for the energy, they do things that they feel will attract invitations. I'd like you to consider that as a projector. Are you sort of trying to trick people into an invitation? Subtly. I know projectors who think they can guide people into invitations. That's not an invitation. And it can be picked up energetically. I have a good projector friend who I knew for many years before human design. I invited her to one of my one-on-one Living Your Design workshops because I wanted her so much to know. Hi, Cecilia. Welcome back. I wanted her to know what she needs to do. You know, I kept feeling like she was always inviting me. She was always the one initiating. She was always the one saying, God, I miss you. We never see each other. And when I would just feel guilty about that and see her, it wasn't that great for either side. And so through the years, we would talk about it, and she'd say, I learned I have to wait for the invitation, because when I get there, it's not the energy I want. I have to wait for the energy to be offered, and then it's sweet, then it's successful, then it's exactly what works. And so it's a subtle kind of thing of recognizing, and again, remembering it's not personal. It's just all of us living a correct life, and that's what you want, is people to correctly invite you, correctly offer available energy. And then you're not taking in the frustration or the toxic energy. So you, as a projector, can read energy. You can have an incredibly strong intellect. Hi, Rodka. Welcome. You can have a strong intellect, but you might want to mute your, I think you have muted your microphone now. And so, yeah, you can see things and the way life is intended to work, because you're also really in tune with systems. And so, again, just some things to start to really, again, go a little deeper in your experimenting with. So you've really got to lean on, your own ability to recognize when you've been recognized. And part of that is part of the trick to decondition, because you are designed to be conditioned. And what is conditioning? Taking in the energy of others. Temporarily, of course. It's inconsistent. And so knowing, how that exchange works means knowing who's got to kind of start the process. So Roxana says, when someone invites you in a vague general way, we should get coffee and discuss blah blah. Does the projector need to wait for them to follow up with a specific time and date versus taking initiative to set up a time and date? Well, this offers me a chance to share something I've noticed, and then all of you guys can see for yourself how that fits within your own internal truth. But when you now go back and consider that comment in the Living Your Design manual that says you're really just waiting for the invitation on the big things, once there is a formal recognition, a relationship there, then it's okay, pretty much, within the umbrella of that overall recognition and relationship, to have more of an exchange. Like, for example, my parents were obviously two projectors, and so you might be wondering, well, how do they get together? Interestingly enough, and I've seen this with another couple that I watched through the years who were projectors, sort of people outside of them kind of invited them. My sister married a projector, and it was a blind date. My father was requested by one of his close friends to take my mother to a movie when she was visiting. And, and then they did. And then he was going, boy, am I glad I did that. And so there is something that initiates that. And then there's the back and forth invitations that can continue and the recognition and all of that that goes back and forth with that. And so I would say to you, Ginger and Roxana, I kind of get those two confused, obviously, at times. I would just say to you that you can offer that. If it's not specific, then you need something specific that you can actually know what's going on. So there's no, you can guide that energy to become more specific. You can also then find out if it's really truly an invitation, or it's just a, oh, someday we should, blah, 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 meaning it'll never come. So it's a way to kind of really get clarity on what is going on with that invitation. And my friend I talked about, she did often be the one that invited me. But again, it was a long-standing relationship in which we were both very clear that I would just respond or not. And then if I couldn't make that particular date, I could offer a different date, and she could really say, yeah, she really is inviting me to consider this getting together. So there's wiggle room in that exchange, but it's best to kind of come from a very formalized, respectful wise kind of relationship first. Does that make sense to you? I know it, to Pam it does, but oh, I see what I had misread the chat, by the way, Roxana, because I kept thinking Ginger's not a projector. You were making a comment, Pam, to her. That's clarifying that to me now. Okay. So back to, this whole concept of being a projector. You really do well learning systems of how things work in life because of, again, you are here to really be able to study and deeply study what is here to be, how things can manifest, how things can work, how things are generated in terms of the mastery of things, but from a student perspective. That's one of the reasons why Ross said, you are here to really study more so than anybody else. And it's true. And you are capable of doing that. And what I notice is some projectors feel frustrated that they're not seen for how much quicker they are in picking things up. And they sometimes then want to guide that so that they can, hurry things up. So Roxana says, so if a projector enters into a situation that wasn't really correct for them, is it usually difficult for them to remove themselves? Well, it depends on how hooked into the energy you are and what is driving you from a not self perspective. If it was a true self, you would not feel recognized and it would not feel correct to be there. And you wouldn't put up with that. So here's an example. My little great niece was born just days after Ra died. I had obviously been studying human design for a very long time. I had, been using this knowledge with my family. My niece actually was really excited about being able to get the exact moment of birth. We had it all. We even had a moment of birth coach in the room since I knew she was going to be occupied giving birth. And so we had really accurate birth data. She's a little energy projector. And we knew from the second she was born, her design all the way down to the lower levels. And she was raised with that kind of, user manual guidance. And so when she was raised, her mom was always asking her, not telling her, but asking her, different things, giving her choices, not asking her from the mind, but saying, yeah, we're going to have dinner. Did you want, would you like to have, and then kind of offer her, this or that, and, let her in her case, splenically in the moment, decide what she was going to do. And so there was this development of a certain behavior coming from outside that made you feel important enough to have your own decision process. And she was always raised that way. So when it came time to go into a playground, there she was, and she was waiting her turn to get up on, you know, the ladder to kind of go down a slide. And a little boy just cut in front of her, you know, just decided he wanted to go first. And she didn't say anything, but she could not help herself. You know, she had been raised to know what felt right, what felt respectful, and she also had the channel of perfected form. She knew the right behaviors, and so she just gave him that eye, gave him that evil eye, gave him that little kind of bitter expression, didn't say a word. And the little boy just took a look at that, felt it, and just removed himself from that behavior. And, you know, that was it. She had guided him by recognizing the lack of recognition, and it didn't feel right to her. She was not going to put up with that. And those are the kinds of things that when you're raised as a generator to, you know, when you're raised as a projector to be invited to this or invited to that, you start, and the manifester, you know, to ask permission so that you're minimizing the resistance, you grow up knowing how it should work that feels correct. Does this make sense, Roxana and Pam? Because she's on her road. She is definitely a projector that knows what she's doing. And that's because that's why human design's here. Human design is not for us, it's for the children. We are going to be educated in a way that can support those being born to kind of have a good track on where to go from here. And obviously we can be enriched by our own process, but we're sort of coming at it from a different angle. They're not necessarily coming at it from being not self. They've got a fresh start. They can be true self. So yeah, this is what we're talking about with the waiting for the invitation. The not self will be what you experience and maybe even taste or just sense. And I've even watched a projector that came again to one of my early one-on-ones, aura to aura, and I literally watched her face turn into a little girl's youthful glow by the end of the workshop. And I asked her about it. I said, "Oh my God, you look beautiful right now. There's some kind of shift that's happened inside of you that sort of melted away a bunch of bitterness. What was that?" And she said, "It's called recognition. It's called remembering who I was many years ago before I had layers and layers and layers of bitterness to kind of reflect back out." It's connecting again to that place. So yeah, success that you see here on the slide, success is, it's not money success. People have different interpretations of what success looks like. It's successful ability to be you in what you're here to be able to do. And the recognition that allowed that invitation, that allowed that wonderful guidance, that allowed that alignment of the energies out there for you to be able to step back and know you were successful, that it worked, that everyone got what they needed out of it. Make sense? So yes, this energy, this interaction is really kind of an interesting kind of thing to recognize as far as the way your aura works. when you're absorbing the energy of the other, it's kind of like being this little radar right in the G center, taking it all in. And that's got to be invited. Otherwise, you are sort of trespassing. I'll put it that way. Any of you generators out there had projectors that have really kind of been out for the energy and it was not invited? It feels like you're being, penetrated and without invitation. And it's not. That is the reaction. It feels like someone who just walked in your front door without knocking. Wait a second here, I didn't invite that. You don't get to just come get my energy. It's not available for the taking. And so what I also disagree with, though, when I've seen the exchanges, it can be a hot debate in human design communities that I remember a time when people would call a projector vampires, out taking everyone's energy. You can't have, if you're a generator, someone taking your energy. They don't just come take your energy. You are your own authority. But again, if you're not wanting to rock the boat and if you're, avoiding conflict and truth, you might just let them take your energy. That's not really being correct, though. That's being not self. So back to your question, Ginger, can technologies like neurofeedback help us shed some of our conditioning? Well, Rod never really he was a purist in terms of, kind of talking about all that. However, and I think it's because he didn't want people running around going and using all of these external tools because it shifts. Again, the real correctness is that everybody needs to use your strategy and authority. However, he was a proponent that there are certain technologies today that are kind of some things that can help along the way. And so I wouldn't say yes or no. I would say that you've got to kind of enter into all of those with kind of eyes wide open. Strategy and authority is really the ultimate authority to guide you through all decisions on what to use or not use, and not to assume that just because it maybe works one time, it works all the time, because in my experience, again, you have to really trust your own inner authority and not just some external decision. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question a little bit? It's kind of a vague answer, but I want to really bring you back to what is the truth, and that's the strategy and authority will guide you through all of that. So Ginger says the other extreme for projectors may be to contain your aura for fear of being intrusive. Well, but that's someone who's really not taking on the correct invitations because their mind is taking on fears about it. That's a mental, not self decision. So it can feel invasive when you are, and yet projectors are so curious about the other, they just sometimes don't think about what they're doing. They're just going for it. That's kind of what I've noticed. So that's why we're having this discussion, so that you know that that is something that's creating resistance that doesn't need to be there. There really is nothing you have to do to get the invitation. The correct invitations come at the right time, at the right place, with the right people, when you are at your frequency that is correct. So just be you, and be the hummingbird that gets invitations when it's the right season, when it's the right time, when it's the right flower, when it's the right nectar, all of those things. So who are you? That's really what you're focused on. That's what you're taking in. That's what you're discovering through that invitation with the available energy you've been offered. And you're going to do that one-on-one. And so one of the things to recognize is that those around you that are not getting the focus will sometimes feel that. I know people that are in public speaking, projectors, remembering that, sort of try to turn their focus, in a very direct one-on-one way. You always feel deeply connected and deeply recognized by these projectors, and it's noticeable. So one thing to also bear in mind, you're a projector. You are not interacting with the world sacrally. It's about interacting with the other through recognition. And so there's another piece of advice from, again, very experienced projectors, and that is give up your agenda when you go into the energy. It's not your agenda that you see that you would love to take advantage of. It's not your mind that's there to really guide that energy necessarily. It's the energy being taken in, and then you knowing through your own abilities what you're going to do with it. Let the energy be the guide for you to then guide through. Don't come in with an agenda. It's like the dance performance, and instead of deciding the path you're going to dance with, and then you end up stepping on their toes the whole time, you're letting the dance become one. You're letting the energy flow and take you where you need to guide. There's a difference. So if your aura is distorted, you're also not going to read the other aura cleanly. You're not going to do it without an agenda. That isn't the right time to guide. You need to be prepared to come in cleanly without an agenda and just see what works in the moment. And you can be amazing at getting right in there and knowing exactly where someone's stuck. And generators need that. So we have different kinds of projectors. We have, it depends on the configuration of the body graph. And each one of you are going to have your own kind of, process you're going to have to go through with deconditioning as a result of that. Your design's already working for you, though. So after time, you will start to kind of give up that caring on whether you're having to get an invitation. I mean, literally all you need is one in your lifetime. It's really not you being invited every day. So just do what you love and the recognition will come. If you're initiating people and they're resisting you and not seeing you, that's not going to be a successfully fulfilled life. And so if you are an energy projector, what that means is that you have definition below the throat. So there is within your own body a form of energy produced that is coming from a motor. Obviously not the sacral because you are a projector, but that is producing an energy field inside of you. And what is interesting to bear in mind with that is it can be very challenging for you to decondition. It's kind of hard to get rid of your energy without an invitation. In fact, it's not correct without an invitation. And so what happens is you can get a little antsy. Be aware of that. Watch for that. Be careful with that. Because what that energy's antsiness is doing is it's giving you an urge to manifest. It wants to get to the throat. That's where you get into these little, they feel kind of manipulative, kind of, manipulating someone to invite you because you want to release the energy. You want to engage. And that can lead you to initiating. It's hard to unhook from other people when you're a projector. And then again, when you're getting that release. So So this is just something to recognize. You've got to kind of learn to kind of quiet yourself at times, and the waiting for the invitation can be difficult. I know energy projectors that benefit from physical activities. And again, it's not consistent, reliable. It's not like getting into routine and then, because you need to know when enough's enough. It works best when you can just kind of say, let's go, because someone's, said, hey, I'm going to go work out. Do you want to come? Yeah, let's do it. And so these are the kinds of things to know. It may take you longer than 7 years if you're an energy projector, because if you've got energy in your form, how do you know the difference between what you're creating and what they're creating? So it does take a while at times to kind of sort all that out, to recognize that. Now, what about classic projectors? Classic projector is one that will have definition below the throat, and it's not going to include a motor. So the classic case here was the definition to the splenic center. You could also have definition to the G center and be a self-projected projector, and that's a classic projector. It's a little easier to be agendaless when you're a classic projector, and so it's maybe a little easier to decondition and to just sort of focus on the invitation and your authority, because your authority is either going to be coming straight from what you say, from your identity, or it's going to come from your intuition and your awareness. You could have a defined ajna center and head center, by the way, and be a classic projector. Again, there's definition below the throat. That's what the definition of a classic projector is, and it is not going to include a generating an energy producing center. So a mental projector is going to therefore be those projectors that have definition from the throat up. You might have an open throat, but you've got definition that makes you a mental projector. You are defining, you have a defined way you think as you guide. Now, the real issue for a mental projector is, how do you determine mind from environment? The environment that's sort of guiding the way you're again going to use your outer authority in decision making. Your decision making is based on the environment and what someone's and what your actual outer authority is saying. So you got to pay attention to your environment. Bounce things off of other people in that environment. What should you do, and kind of get this feel for what your outer authority ends up deciding. So they can be great outer authorities. In fact, they're kind of the guides to the guides. A mental projector can still take in the energy of a classic projector and an energy projector, a guide of a guide, but they've got to be correct. Hang on, I'm trying to get to the chat. There you go, Annette. She said, that's it. The agenda in that situation was invasive. You bet. You bet. You want someone coming in clean. You want someone without their agenda. It's not up to them. It's all of us with our own inner authority. But they can see things that we can't. We can be blinded by our own blind driving energy. And again, so can an energy projector to some degree. And it's tough. It's tough when you've got that energy. So all of you that are present as projectors in this program are energy projectors. So was that resonating with you when we were talking about those things? Pam and Roxana and of course Cheryl and I have, been together a long time talking about this. Okay. Well, let's just again recognize that when you're being recognized, it's coming from you, not what you say or do. It's already coming from you. That's the perfect frequency you put out. You put out that wonderful, Pam, you've got people should recognize your mind. They should. You're an outer authority, but not you running your mind, deciding how to guide them. You've got the willpower that comes through. You've got the splenic awareness that comes through. You've got the emotional awareness that comes through. And when you're waiting and letting that shine through, the invitation will be there for all that energy. It's again, just it's the waiting's hard. My God, you've got 2 motors. That's, whoops. Oh dear. Let me go back to, there we go. I did something that kind of screwed that up. So you guys will have to tell me. Can you see this again now? The energy projector slide? Okay, sorry about that. All right. Just going to check the chat, make sure that everybody is okay. Let's keep going. So your process as you start to enter into, again, a deeper experiment is to, again, recognize you're really focusing on the other. Who are you? It's one-on-one. And a recommended path is to study those others through a system. When I went through my program, we didn't even say it has to be human design, and I wouldn't say it has to be human design. It doesn't have to be human design, but having a system that you can kind of study the other through is certainly important, and human design does a pretty good job of that. So ongoing support, I would recommend really jumping right into all kinds of different materials that can support you going deeper in your own self-study of the system too. Obviously, the definitive book of human design would be a wonderful one for you. Anything that helps you kind of understand a person's character, because knowing their character can be somewhat different than knowing their design. And so profile kind of helps you with that. And there's books on profile by type, because really it's not just profile, it's the type and the profile together that kind of lets you really get a feel for someone's characteristics. And there is circuitry book, anything that's going to get you deeper into the whole system would be beneficial. And there was a recognition by Ra that this type really does need to take on the task of education much more deeply to be correct than any other type. That's why he offered what he called an endowment program. Now, he did not offer endowment discounts, 20% discounts for projectors to anything that was a certification program, because he recognized the need for equality of all types in terms of becoming a professional. But that's why the foundation classes don't have that. But sometimes certification programs, if they advertise them, will. So always look and see if they come with a discount. And if you haven't enrolled, to be known for a projector, do so with the IHDS and other HD organizations that honor those discounts. This is a time traditional kind of thing in human design that was started by Ra many years ago. So beginner information is available. There's all kinds of support groups. Again, web search, you can get more information about human design. Be careful with those web searches. There are so many websites out there that are unauthorized, that are also polluted. There was humandesign.com was actually abandoned, and it used to have a whole bunch of educational material. It's been abandoned. It's also full of viruses, so be careful. And again, courses, there's now courses specifically for projectors by projectors, and those come and go. And those I've been told are quite informative and quite nice because you're really connecting with people that really get what it is to be a projector. Jasper said, would it be good for a projector to study or educate on anything during their waiting for the invitation so that they have a particular item knowledge they could be invited on? Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, the best thing is to kind of follow your authority on what your interests are and see where that goes. Obviously, if someone's offering a course and inviting you to consider it, those are things you can consider. It's just really good. I mean, going back to my great niece, oh my God, from the moment she was born, she couldn't speak. And she had her little whatever you put in your mouth. She was kept occupied with that. I can't remember what they're called. Sorry about that. Because they had some little cute nickname for it, her Binky or something like that. But anyway, she was so busy with that all the time, but her eyes said it all. She was looking at things, putting her fingers on things as if they were buttons. Pacifier. Thank you, Ginger. And putting her finger on things to see how it works. She obviously FaceTimed my sister, who's her grandmother, I think without her parents knowing it, when she was 1.5, just because she had been watching everybody use their iPhones, and she just decided she wanted to see her grandmother, and she did it. I mean, they are smart as a whip, and they figure things out. They're very good at systems. And so having anything that, again, it depends on your own design, what I would invite a person to. But it's better when they're invited to it. So again, those are the projectors. Does that give you some additional insights today? I'd like to also take some time for the reflector. Good. You're very welcome. So let's talk about the reflector now. And reflectors, oh my goodness, they just need to, if we're going to sum it all up, slow down. They are not of this world in the same way that the rest of us are. All the other types with definition that are defined and here gravitationally defined on this planet are what we would refer to as solar beings. We're really, taking in life through, our own definition that is really, kind of gravitationally involving, our life here on planet Earth with our relationship with the sun, and yet the reflector is very different. Their relationship is more connected to the moon. They're what we call lunar beings. I've had a reflector who's in the community a long time. I've watched her. She actually, many years, I think it's now probably been 5 years, she did a reflector retreat in which because there was a time she was the only reflector in the community, and then there was another one, and then there was just those two for a long time. But eventually there's been enough kind of through all these years to have enough to kind of form a little community. Although they don't get together very often. But she actually did a retreat, and it was for a week, and the whole deal was there was absolutely yes, it was Nisarg, Jessie. And so what she did is she did a retreat where all the reflectors came together and stayed together for a week, and they were really kind of experimenting with just being in the realm of aura that was only reflector aura. That's pretty rare. I mean, that's impossible to have done. And so even food being delivered for the retreat was left outside the door. There was no any kind of aura from anybody, but the connection that would be coming through the transits and each other as reflectors, which is a very different aura. It's a resistant and sampling aura. So it was kind of an interesting thing. And what I remember she said was that by the end of the week, there was this deep, almost vertical connection to life. Think of us on this planet as being sort of horizontal. We're sort of here, but their pull, their attraction, their connection was much more of a vertical one, much more, with the moon and the stars and the connection, because their aura is locked into the program meaning the movement of all of the different aspects astrologically of these, stars and the neutrinos passing through the, ongoing passing of neutrinos through all these things on their way passing through Earth. That's what they're connected to. That's what's a correct connection for them. So they should be purely reflecting the daily program, the daily transits, as they express who they are. That's the question. Who am I today? Well, who are you being imprinted to be that day? Can you be yourself? Can you come from a place that has still got a connection to something internally you through the imprinted gates that you receive, through that DNA connection that is consistent and reliable, and be yourself? Even though every moment is a surprise, because that's the way you're designed. Just to be in a complete surprise as the transits are just unfolding. So if you're a reflector and you're not self, it's this feeling of disappointment, but it's really a disappointment that is a reflection of not being plugged into the mechanics correctly. So what is the way to move through life? Well, you have to connect very deeply to what is guiding this experience of moment-to-moment surprise, and that's your connection with the moon. So again, at least moving through life fully present and aware during the course of all of the different activations that come through the moon in 28 and a half days, 29 days. It's a lunar cycle. So that's really what is allowing the correct movement and interaction with life. And once you are correctly moving through life in a really big picture, almost timeless kind of experience when we think of it from our perspective as solar beings. But what does that offer as a type? It offers a person who's ultimately not connected to, what they're transmitting and taking in a way that's, so conditioned. They're not really conditioned by the others in their life. They're conditioned by what is the potential for all of us to break out and be unique, differentiated beings. Because they're almost like the standard from which you could see, well, here's what the purest of conditioning is bringing right now. And so who's not being caught up in that? Who's not being homogenized? Who's actually living a unique outer authority based on their own unique expression of life and openness that they've learned through? Who's breaking through? Who's stepping out as a pure, differentiated, unique consciousness and form? They're pretty much the objective judge of that. Sounds like a shaman or an artist or a mystic, or someone who's just really not of this world, that is really being involved in the world, but in a way that is sort of standing more on the sidelines and being able to see things much more objectively as a result of it, rather than just being caught up in it all. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you, Jessie? Yeah. I wouldn't say transmitter, Annette, because transmitting is usually transmitting out the energy, but they are a reflection of the universal energies. Do you see the difference? Truly receivers of universal energy, tuned into it absolutely and correctly. So, yeah, and able to sample the auras of others, not necessarily absorb it all. They're not taking it all in. They're resistant to that. They're not hooked into the auras of the others as well as much as we are, the solar beings, but more of a sampling of it. That's why they can be sort of this neutral, objective judge, because they can take in just what they're going to take in. They don't have to take it all in. Well, that depends on if that's what their focus is on. I would say they're just really good reflections of the health of the environment around them and how well people are and what our potential as a collective consciousness is. I would say that would be true. I don't know about the other. I think that gets into individual reflectors. So what I didn't do when we were talking about authority is I didn't go into authorities for the outer authority that we refer to as lunar authority. And I again wanted to really offer this in a more complete way. So now we're going to go back. We're not just talking about type now. We're going to talk about lunar authority. And so moon as the authority, it's the guidance that is coming through the connection and in a relationship with the moon that is really creating the ability to tap into your authority. So these are going to be reflectors. They do not have any centers defined. They must have, those people in their life that, again, talk about agendaless. I mean, this is like the ultimate in no agenda, because they really are just almost there as innocence in terms of what they're taking in and reflecting back out. And as they go through all of these different lunar gate imprints over a course of a lunar cycle, they're filtering in what they're really kind of deciding through that process. So having trustworthy advisors, just again, meaning that you've got people in your life that are really good neutral sounding boards that care about you and really are not trying to put their own agenda on you while you discuss your situation and potential decision through the full cycle is really what is the tool and the process that allows their own you could say clarity, but it's not like they have emotional definition, but it's kind of like they're still going through a process that leads to their own clarity with the decision. So Ginger says the question is whether they're allowed to flow with the universal energies in our society. What is that experience like? Well, we'll ask Jessie in just a minute. And before I offer that, I wanted to just again lay down a little bit more foundation for us to truly step back and appreciate the experience of that Jessie has. So this is just for decision making. And so just as a reminder for the mechanics of that, if you remember how centers are defined, you need to have a channel that's defined, 2 gates on both sides. You can also have hanging gates within that definition, and that's what you're transmitting out into the world as your uniquely different, always consistent and reliable way it functions. It's a limitation, obviously, the defined center is. And then you've got the potential as a reflector to either have your centers be undefined or open. It's undefined if it at least has an imprinted gate that came from your, imprinting of neutrinos at the moment of birth, or, approximately 3 months before you were born. That's the design side. So that's just so you remember how definition works. So what happens over the course of a lunar cycle, here's Jesse's chart in the middle here with the mandala, is the moon's going around a full lunar cycle, and as it's going through, it literally activates all 64 hexagrams over the course of a lunar cycle. So in a course of a month, you're probably going through at least, well, you can do the math, but over a lunar cycle, you're divide by 64 hexagrams, you can see about how many per day you would be it would be transiting through. And so it's literally going to activate gates, either gates you've already got imprinted, or again, gates that are opposite of that in a channel will temporarily create a conditioning of those centers that are defined. That's what you're plugging into. That's what you're plugging into for your decision-making process with your relationship and guidance that comes through the moon. Now, it's different in terms of what you're experiencing day to day with neutrinos, because we're only looking at the moon right now. The moon is what is guiding this process, not all the other transits. The moon, the passing through a pattern that you filter through. It's what starts the moment you're born. And it's always there. So this is what was in the book that shows you can sort of look at exact moments and time, dates, and exactly the time, and know where is the moon right now. Well, if the moon's in the 56th gate, this particular, not Jesse, but a particular reflector had no temporary life force created by the moon. They just had open centers. So they're filtering through that connection with the moon at that moment. And then at the stroke of midnight on October 15th, 2006, the moon went into the 31st gate. That created a temporary definition, a conditioning from the moon that created a connection with the throat and the G center. And, it was a projector life force that was operating in that moment through the moon. So they're filtering their decision through that kind of experience, that conditioning. And then it just goes literally through all 64 gates, and you can see there's a pattern of definition created that is cyclical. Every single lunar cycle pattern will be the same for that reflector, because it started with where the moon was when they were born. And then it's compared to and composite with their natal design, their natal and their design imprinting. So here's Jesse. You can see the personality imprinting was the moment of birth. This is where, literally the moon was right there in the 54th gate. You can see where that is in the wheel, where that star is. And so this started Jesse's lunar cycle. And the very next place the moon went after Jesse was born was in the 61st gate. It's like, welcome to the world, Jesse. You are this gate of ambition, ready to, jump in and use, whatever energy is available to you to rise up and really see where life will take you. And then we will start you right off in the very next gate with your mind filtering things through the 61st gate, the inner mysteries of life. And you just keep going through these different cycles for the rest of your life. This is your pattern. You can actually, again, kind of go through that. And let's just say you're presented with a decision, and at that moment, the moon's in the 33rd gate. You don't go waiting until, the 54th gate. You say, oh, I guess I need to make a decision about this. Let's filter through your trustworthy people you're going to talk it over with, process through the whole thing. And you're going to see what your lunar map looks like, because that's what you're filtering your decision through. I only did the first 7 days out of the 28, 29 days. But, you know, if you haven't already done so, you know, you could finish it. But here's kind of what I was kind of seeing. And I want all of you to be able to see how it's done so that you could kind of, again, understand what Jessie would do to create it. And so basically, here's the 33rd gate. So if you were to blow this image up so you could see a little closer what was going on with these gates, the chart Jessie has, if you put the 33rd gate activated, I'm going to, you know, just again show you so you can see where that comes from. It's in the throat center. If you activated the 33rd gate, there is no gate on the other side. She doesn't have the 13th gate in her design. So it just keeps it open. It's again a reflector chart. So that's going to be the first way you're filtering. And then the very next place it goes in the wheel is the 7th gate. If you hook up the 7th gate, which is in the G center, it also doesn't have any direct connection to a 31 gate, so it stays a reflector. In fact, I did the calculations. The 29th gate is next. In your situation, again, no new lunar conditioned life forces, so it's still a reflector design. But when you get into the 59, which comes next, that now is in the sacral center, and it will connect to the 6th gate, and these two centers are going to become defined temporarily, and that's conditioning. And so that's the sacral and the solar plexus and the channel of mating, and it's an emotional pure generator energy that is being expressed by Jessie's moon relationship, the guidance of the moon that's taking, you know, the process of the decision making for Jessie, and is again just part of what would then be a part of the process of filtering when she's bouncing it off of those trustworthy advisors. And you keep going through. The next 9 activations would be also still filtering with no new conditioning life forces, but you get to a certain place, you can see it up at the top of the mandala, and there'll be all kinds of activations that are potentially going to take place over a course of a lunar cycle. So Jessie, have you gone through the process? Have you mapped yours out? It's quite a process. You go through and you can literally see, you know, your pattern, your entire pattern. And that's kind of what you're going through as you go through your cycle. So yeah, that's what Jessie's doing in those at least one lunar cycle. I mean, obviously, decisions may take more than one lunar cycle, and it might be, you know, maybe a few days even after, you know, a lunar cycle that you do, because it's kind of similar to those of you that have other authorities that take time. You know, the timing is a process of different perspectives that are coming through in your way to kind of internalize that physically. And so even though we say she doesn't have inner authority, meaning there's no defined functioning centers and channels that they're really being defined for you, you are tapping into your DNA as you are engaging with the conditioning of that through the connection with the moon. So there's a part that's within you that is consistent and reliable. Good, because it just gives you a feel for that. And it's just so you see, again, there is a process of tapping into every aspect of every activation of you that is part of your decision. That's what you're allowing, is every single DNA part of you can come out in its own unique way in that movement through the moon. It's still a different connection though each time. Well, yeah, that has been an interesting challenge. So an interesting thing that I watched, and I'll just, again, it's kind of like, what am I going to have for lunch today? Well, you're not going to wait a month to decide what you're going to have for lunch today. You sort of just live your life, but just recognize that when you are really navigating through life, wherever you are going to be, whatever decision you're going to make is a movement through your life that sets up your whole world. It sets up who you're going to be with, when you're going to be with them, what you're doing, what your job is, where you're living, and it's a factor that's deeply a part of each one of our lives. Where you are in your place when you have an open G, place is really important because you're taking in the conditioning of all those people, places, and things into your, process of fulfilling your destiny. So what I will say about that is anything that is truly important to you that really will dictate major changes for you, jobs, homes, and people, you've got the time. If it's to be correct, if it's really your, movement, your path, your destiny, whatever you're taking in during the course of that is going to be an important thing that only you can really, you're going to pay the consequences if it's not correct. And so let me just put it this way. Our mind can say, yeah, you're going to lose out. You're not going to get, but that doesn't mean that the right place is going to go. There's a saying that, if you, what is meant for you cannot be lost. And so, for example, I had another reflector in my class. He really wanted to go, deep in this process. And so at one point he decided to change jobs. He had been in a job in a company that, he was well respected for, but it was killing him. It was too much. I think he was running a Q&A department, a quality assurance department for a production company. And it was way too much stress and pressure and all kinds of stuff going on, and it just wasn't for him. And so what he decided mentally initially, that he was going to have to quit the job. He was just going to have to quit. He had been offered another job for another company. He thought, well, I'm just going to have to leave because this one's killing me. And so he didn't make a decision. He actually got on our forum in our LYD and went through a journal of for 30 days of his process of deciding about this job. And we literally got to be the witness of this process for him. In the end, what happened is he really thought he was leaving. They came back and they would say, is there anything we can do to keep you? We really, really want you in the company. And, no, I really can't do this job anymore. And so over time, it was really seriously going to be a factor that he thought he was going to leave. And then they came back and they said, well, what would you do if you could do anything here? How about that? Never thought that would happen. So suddenly he didn't know. He had no idea. It wasn't a mental decision. And so he started kind of, checking things out, talking things over with different people, bouncing off of different things as he was filtering through his lunar cycle. And at some point, it all sort of kind of came together, a certain role he could play that the company was, really excited about. And it took more than 30 days. I think it was more like 47 days or something like that. And then it just became clear to him that this is where he wanted to stay and he wasn't going to leave. But again, life is pretty magical. What our mind thinks has to happen, well, is quite different than when you surrender to what life will, unfold unfold to be. And so it's just a matter of recognizing. I had no response to go to a workshop I really, really wanted to go to. It was a transformational workshop Rob was doing, and he was never going to do it again. And he was spending a lot of personal time with each person, going through every aspect of your life. And I thought, holy moly, when are you ever going to get this again? I really, really wanted to respond, and I didn't. I kept even waiting to maybe get the tickets and jump on a midnight flight to get there the next day. I was just baffled why my sacral wasn't going to go do that. It was going to be over a week's time. I would have had to spend a lot of money on the workshop and all the accommodations for over a week, and it just didn't happen. And I thought, well, there it goes. I've missed my chance. And again, doesn't our mind say that to all of us? We can't. Society won't let us. The decision comes, the decision goes. You didn't go to the workshop, it's gone. Well, what was interesting is right in the middle of it, when I was sitting there wishing I was there, he decided he was going to do another version of that workshop, and this one was going to be over a weekend, and it was going to be full days, not just 2 or 3 hours a day. And it was like, boom, sacral response, done. Something better came along that was right for me. And that's really what we have to kind of experiment with and see, well, what would happen if you didn't do what you think has to happen? Just experiment, see what happens. But you're seeing that Jesse really needs to tap into each of those places that are deeply Jesse, even though they're temporary conditioning fields that you're filtering through. So I did something I don't normally do, because I found it interesting kind of diving into your chart, Jesse. But we all have 26 activations in our designs, right? And so I looked at, when I'm kind of going through mapping it all out, I'm saying, well, you know what's interesting is she actually only has 17 different gates, but there are 26 unique activated gates, because, you know, they're in different lines and different stuff, different planets, different everything. So this is, you know, what is activated. Looking at, I put it in fuchsia so you know it's not personality or design, but both combined. And so there's an emphasis, obviously, on certain themes that are unique to who Jesse is as a reflector. So what if we took a camera and, like a flower opening over time-lapse photography, we watched the full blossom of a flower over a course of a whole lunar cycle? What would Jesse look like? Well, this is Jesse. So over the course of a full lunar cycle, every single one of these life forces would be activated. So all of these centers would be something that would be expressed in the overall lunar cycle. But guess what's never tapped into? The head center. That's not true for every projector. And so again, it's interesting to just see that each and every reflector is special, taking in things in their own unique way. And so I just want you to recognize that even though you've got all that openness, that is exactly what's going to happen. So your reflective aura is resistant and sampling. It kind of taps into things. And it samples, and it's more like Teflon. Things sort of, you know, kind of slide off of the reflector aura differently than what comes in for the rest of us. But you can do quite a lot to recognize who's different, who's really kind of being not homogenized, because homogenized is kind of like waking up every day to the same themes. Everybody is being or trying to parrot back what you're experiencing with the transits, and nobody's really got their own unique perspective or voice from it. And so the real everyday, not the decision-making process, which is what we just saw, but the everyday process of a reflector is plugged into more than just the moon, but all the transits that go through all the different transit fields. So the way you find out what the transit is of the day is you take a just now chart, and we know that just now, if someone was being born, that's what it stands for. If someone was born just now, this would be what their design is. But there's always a black and a red imprinting on a just now chart. So if it's really truly a reflection on what's being transiting right this moment, it would be coming through just the black, just the transit of the black. So that's the only thing that's the transit in the moment. It's not always for the whole day either. It's really a transit of what's transiting right then and there for the neutrinos. And so if you see this these activated gates, and you combine that with the reflector chart, this is not Jessie, this is just for the workshop, you'll see that this is who that reflector would be in that moment. But this is what I created, and this would have been 45 minutes ago, Jessie. So here's Jessie's natal chart, and now you look at the transit. All of a sudden, talk about a spiritual connection. You've got the entire G center, you know, love and direction all right there, the reflection of the totality all activated right there, also backed by the willpower, the shaman energy. There's your shaman energy, Ginger. It was a transit, this deep inner knowing, unique way of thinking, transit, this push for the pattern, the correct pattern, right there in the transit. Can you sense and feel the energies of these that are passing through for you, Jessie? Yeah. And that's what's plugged in. That's what you're filtering through. That's what you are being. That's what you're able to reflect. And so it's about a process of exploring who you are and yourself and who you are in the moment. The ongoing support is to kind of have access to, you know, your own unique moon cycle, to kind of chart it out. Taking transit classes, connecting to that can be helpful, so you know, again, what you're processing through, what you're taking in, all the different energies you can feel through that. What's helpful about the ABC class is not really the channel understanding, but the circuitry and the flow that channels have within circuitry. You start to identify those. You know, when there is a reflector network, they're not very common. They come and go. So the transits have a strong influence. Sometimes I can feel strongly about something and it can totally change the next day. The transit classes, they come and go. Another reflector who, you know, obviously really was heading that up was Darmen, and Leela is the pure generator, and I think she's a pure generator. Might be, yeah, I think she's a pure generator. They were offering transit classes. I did one once too. I haven't in a long time. I've been too busy with just doing what I am doing. But yeah, you just kind of have to, they're usually, I would kind of plug into seeing, I think that Darman and Leela are not going to do them anymore. I think they offered one more, but I don't know, maybe they have self-studies that they would have available. You could check that out. But those are just some things to, yeah, those would be areas you could continue to kind of go a little deeper in your experimenting with. Makes sense? And so to wrap up the program, I was going to take some time to do that, but I wanted to see, is there anything you wanted to share or say at the moment, Jessie, about all of this? How was that how did you experience, this module today, this ability to take a deeper look? Anything stand out for you that was sort of unique? Good. You're very welcome. It's a very personal journey all of us go through in this program. And I really do respect that you allow us a little window into your process. So all of us have aura types. And it's our strategy that's actually protecting us. It's what engages us correctly with the other. And so projectors really have to wait to be invited. Your aura probes and penetrates when it's invited. And the generator waits to respond. You cannot protect your open enveloping aura when you initiate. It has to tell you what you respond to and not respond to, what it's available for and not. The reflector is a resilient sampling aura, but it's really got a whole different time process. If you're a little reflector child and you've got parents trying to push you in the middle of all the interactions with all the other kids, they're not honoring your process. You're much more on the sidelines as a reflector, really kind of taking in, like the canary in the coal mine, what's happening in the environment. Is it a healthy environment? I remember in a audio with Bra, he talked about really fully, if you're in the right place at the right time as a reflector, you want to deeply go into that environment, eat the food from that environment. You'll know if you're not healthy, you're really not in the right place. Aura, aura originates from the configuration of your life force, Annette. I have a totally open G center. What I referred to when I talked about the aura, that the projectors really zeroing in right on the aura, because they're really zeroing in on the full essence of your connection, your place within the totality, that is who you really are. If you kind of consider, we're not really separate from the whole, but our aura has an energy field that's self-contained that goes out into the world. That's coming from your life force configuration, your definition. Does that help? So yes, the manifester, you don't need anybody necessarily in terms of your authority. I mean, your authority and your strategy. But remember, your strategy is what kind of lines you up to connect correctly with what you're engaging with in life and others. And then you use your authority to navigate through that. So a manifester, informing before you initiate, before you act upon what your inner authority kind of clearly determined you were going to initiate, your aura repels it, in other words, pushes out and has impact. That's the way you're operating with the other. I've heard different comments about different types kind of having more of an engagement with each other. The reflectors also being somewhat, separate from the others is not saying that reflectors can't have a relationship with generators and manifestors with projectors, but they're just different. The manifesting generator is a generator. You can't separate that. You're a generator aura. You're not a manifester. It's a generator aura. So that's one to go back and re-listen to. Yes, our last one, when we talked about manifesting generators and generators, it's one type. It's the aura type is an open and enveloping aura type. It's all the same aura type. It's just that you have within your aura a configuration that also has a manifesting capacity, but you still have to wait to respond. So again, it's the way we're operating through strategy, then aligned with authority, allows for the full expression of whatever the configuration is, whether it's pure generator or manifesting generator. So acceptance by type is to really get down to the roots of who you are. And as a manifester, just embrace that you are here deep within you with this initiative, this power that is there to manifest uniquely as yourself by your own authority. And that's, maybe through lack of informing or people just not knowing what to do with that field of energy that feels so different. They may have really tried to control you. They may have really dampened your spirit, put the fire out. And you can re-engage and initiate that fire again. Might take a little deconditioning, looking to see where people are impacting you through openness and what the mind does if you're trying to do this mentally. The generator or the manifesting generator, you may feel liberated at this point in time to really kind of recognize you do not have to be the manifester. You're not designed to be the one that initiates everything, the go-getter. You can relax. Actually, things will come to you. It's designed with your sacral for the attraction to your frequency and life force to come to you. And then you'll see what you respond to. So as a projector, you may sense a relief that you don't have to do anything. To get recognition, you don't. You might wish you had invitations that you recognize are out there and that you see might be nice, but this is all filtering through the mind. You're not really necessarily going to get the right energy out of it, the right invitation out of it. So as a reflector, you may now fully understand why you're so different, and maybe even a little excited that you are in the forefront of whatever the possibilities are that you are really an expression of, uniquely as yourself. So if you've read this in the book, it's time to just kind of talk a little bit about it. If you've got an aura that has a strategy that needs to operate correctly, how do you protect your aura when you're sleeping? When you're not at that level of conscious awareness? Well, if you're going to sleep in someone else's aura, you are being conditioned all night without any kind of conscious awareness of the impact of that. So to sleep, it's recommended that you sleep in your own auric field. And that, by the way, means without any pets either. I know that's a heartbreak for some of you. But it's just, again, something you can't do mentally either. I actually knew all this, was told all this, and I also did not respond to that part of my deconditioning for a couple years, actually about 2.5 years. And I had a personal story that really validated for me how important that was, and so I've done it ever since. But it was when I went to the Ibiza event after I'd been involved with human design for almost 6 years at that time. And I had experimented with sleeping in my own aura before I went there, but I then had another dose of purely, for at least a month that I was there, I was only in my own aura. And I actually had gotten a little bit of psoriasis on my back before I went, and it immediately cleared within 24 hours of being there. I thought, wow, that's interesting. Oh, well, I don't know what that's about. But when I got home, it came right back. Right back. As soon as I got into sleeping in the aura again. And so this was just an interesting thing. So rather than making a mental decision not to sleep in the aura, I waited until I had a response. And then I even just said, well, let's just see what happens for a few weeks. And we started sleeping so much better, so much more well rested, that when I was forced to sleep in the aura because we had visitors, I couldn't get a good night's sleep neither one of us could. And it was like, well, gosh, this seems to work better the other way. And so you have to make all decisions through true authority and not through your mind, not just because someone says so. But it's something for you to again, realize that if you do a really great job in your waking hours to operate correctly as yourself, and then you go to bed and get conditioned all night, it's still affecting you. There's no conscious way to navigate through that. Now, manifestors, projectors, and reflectors, you cannot go to bed exhausted because you've gone too far. You don't have a sacral that knows when enough's enough, that says, used up, done, go to bed. You've got to kind of go into a bed situation or relaxing your way into sleep so that you did not cross the line, because that can be hard to recover from. Pure generators don't have their throat connected to a motor, so literally when all their sacral is used up and done generating, that's the perfect time for bed. Manifesting generators, you still want to go to sleep when you're exhausted, but you can go to bed, maybe, do things to kind of dissipate. Now you're horizontal, not vertical, dissipate some of the manifesting energy, doing things, reading things, whatever. And these are just things to experiment with. These are good, healthy habits that will help also support you in your deconditioning process, because you're becoming more and more closer to who you are. Yeah, and that tells me, I'm looking at your comment, Annette, about trouble dissipating energy. You're probably not using enough of it up during the day. If I go to bed and there is a difference. If you've ever, like I've had a couple of times where for whatever reason I was working on something and it was an all-nighter, which I didn't think I'd do after college, but I was totally at a situation where I used up every ounce of my energy, and then I got an incredible night's sleep as a result. It dawned on me that every now and then you got to empty your tank, totally empty your tank. And if you're just sort of waiting till you're a little tired and you're trying to keep a certain bedtime all the time, oh, well, good God, no wonder. 3 motors, you will find, if you're really allowing your response to take over, those motors, you'll dissipate your energy correctly. And maybe you just are going to have less sleep. Sometimes it's the mind that also prevents you from really using up the energy that you've got correctly. So these are just things to recognize. It might take a while to find your own flow, your own rhythm, and it may vary. It may vary. It may not be the same thing all the time. So Jasper's saying sleeping alone now for months, both partner and you, and a much better night's sleep. It is a luxury, Jasper. It's something that Raw recognized can be an economic issue. You live in a place where, the walls don't prevent the aura from coming through. And that sometimes is exactly what happens. What do you do? What to do, right? And that's the way it sometimes does work. But again, in time, I made choices that led to more choices that led to more choices. And, eventually things work out, in a correct way. It is difficult to explain to your partner, and it's difficult to explain to society. And so if that's what you have to do, you're coming also from your mind. But what I did is it wasn't hard to explain when it became a physical experience for my body, where the person could see, oh my God, whatever it is creating psoriasis for you. It was stress on my body. I had been really deconditioning, and getting more and more aligned with who I was, and it was really making an experience that was easy for me to convince them, because I just said, it doesn't have to be forever. I want to try this out and see if it's better for both of us. Do you see how it can be really something that can be looked at from a positive thing too, and then just to see. And it turned out that we both said, wow, this really does make a difference. But it has to be the right time. I don't think I could have done that the first 2.5 years. For me personally, some of you, I'm so, tickled for you that you can jump into it, immediately. But for me, no, I was pretty conditioned when I got into my experiment. It took a while. Slowly but surely. I think it would have been difficult on my body to immediately try to mentally make changes. It has to be something that's more organic. So that's kind of it. It's the end, but it's the beginning. It's a new road, hopefully, and a new horizon, and perhaps a new experiment, and certainly a road that it's not the end. It truly is the beginning of your experiment in a deeper way, in a way that perhaps you've got some additional perspectives about. I'm glad you did too. I'm glad you're here, Annette. Whoops, oops, and now I screwed up the screen again. Sorry about that. Let me go back to getting it back. I'm starting to really learn this system. I must say, you guys have watched me, and up until now, let me just see if I can get okay. Hang on, I'll get it back. It was really just the last slides, but I do want to I promised a few of you some additional information I'll share, so hang on. And it'll be recorded. It's still recording right now if you guys have to go. I clicked the wrong, I tried to close the chat and I closed the slides instead. So that's what happened. You should be able to see it again. I'll just do a quick check on chat. Can you guys see the slides again? It's unfortunately the beginning slide, but I can jump it to the end. Sort of a process of what all we've covered today, a lot. So as you continue in your process, just continue reflecting on what you've learned. It will take time to integrate this information. There's plenty of time. That's what our mind says. There's not enough time. We don't have time. Society won't give us time. You know what? It does. It does give us time. You have plenty of time to experiment with your design. I know we'd love to think that no one's going to give us an opportunity to be ourselves, but you are your authority when you trust it. And how you might experiment and continue, is just something to surrender to and see. Just kind of watch. I did engage my mind. There's nothing wrong with engaging your mind in the experiment. Let it be your ally, so it starts kind of reminding you, hey, aren't you supposed to follow your inner authority? And, let it see when you get resistance. Let it sort of nag you. Hey, you're getting resistance. What's going on? Don't give it the authority to run your life. Let it be the spokesperson for things it's witnessing, but not the authority. Are you someone that, will benefit others with this knowledge? Will you tell people to support you in your experiment? That's one of the things I did, is I said, I need to try some new things, and I would like, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like you to ask me questions, and let me just see where this goes. And so I kind of informed people of, I'm in sort of an experiment here. Would you, kind of help me with that? I've had people ask me what was changing about me. You seem so different. Well, these are things I'm trying. Can you, would you support that? You don't have to do it alone. You want to stay connected, you can absolutely get involved in some of those social media avenues that you were starting to talk about at the beginning. You might exchange your emails on the discussion board. It's not going to be up forever. We're not having the forum, it'll be closed probably within another week or two, but you can post on the forum right now your emails if you want to connect with each other, reach out for study buddies, coaching guidance, by some of the professionals that are listed on that are, able to do that. Not every title of certification you can do that. Specialized readings sometimes are another, when it's the right time, again, when it's the, something that's coming from a process you feel is correct. And then just engaging it. That's really what you got to do. So if you are interested in an ongoing step-by-step curriculum to kind of guide you through the process more deeply, then the next class would be the ABC class. And you can find out more about that on the website. I'm sorry, I'm going to look at the chat. Yeah, there are certification workshops, but all professional workshops, Ginger, require the completion of the foundation classes. This is the first one. You've actually started the process already. So now that you've finished it, the next one would be the ABC class. Bye, Annette. Thanks for being here. So you can, the way I do my ABCs is they're online. They're 7 sessions. They're usually 90-minute sessions. Sometimes I am actually doing one right now. It started in March. Sometimes they're offered twice a week for 4 weeks. Some of you are actually in that. And if you have any questions about the foundation classes, you can contact me. If you had questions about some of the other things, there's continuing education, there's lectures, there are single lectures, there's self-study things you can investigate through the IHDS. But yes, you would have to complete each one of the foundation classes before you can go into a path to certification. And there's multiple directions for professional education and certifications. I teach a certification program, well, it's what Cheryl's in, that basically is allowing her the license to deliver this workshop. That's called Living Your Design Guide. A human design rave analyst is someone who's gone through certification to do chart readings. And so there's different titles, different licenses, all of them, pretty much the pathway into them will be the foundation classes. So for the schedule of the ABCs, I know for those of you who may be interested in the future, one's in process right now. We've already had 2 sessions complete. The next one, class 3 out of 7, will be on Monday. But this one's meeting Mondays and Wednesdays at exactly the same time of GMT that we're meeting now. There's 5 more sessions to go. If you actually feel like you could jump in and you've got the time and it's correct for you through your authority to do that, you could do that. I would let you do that, but you just be informed that, yeah, it's an accelerated class, and you would need to send me as well as Lynette an email about that. Otherwise, I always offer these on an ongoing basis. We've got one that meets weekly starting in May, on May 9th at 21 GMT, 2 p.m. California time. One that starts in June, 16 GMT, 9 a.m. California time. Another one I'll do bi-weekly that'll be in July. It'll be on a Tuesday, Thursday, depending on your time zone, 18 GMT. And then I'll go back to weekly in August. September, there's a class. I'll probably do one more before the end of the year, either November or December. But plenty to pick from. And again, just use your own authority to decide if that's the right thing for you to do. Oh, I guess I'll do one in October too. All right. October and November is where the others are. And that's it. That's it. So again, thanks for being here. Thanks for going through this experience with me. Thank you for, again, opening up to the possibility of something new and a different way of engaging with life around you and taking it on as your own personal journey. If you want to reach me, if you want to share any kinds of feedback or experiences with this process with me, then, obviously those are some ways to do that. So until we meet again, thank you. And yeah, any comments or questions as we wrap up? You're welcome, Jasper. I noticed a friend of yours is actually in my March LYD. That group has jumped in the forum big time. Oh my gosh, they're writing little mini stories on every center. It's quite interesting. So every group is uniquely different, and it can be a life changer. It truly can, Cecilia. All of us, when we really embrace and surrender to what life has in stores, it can be quite a surprise. So again, thanks so much. I'm glad you inspired him to jump in and to really get involved. That's great. So thank you. And I'll see you guys around, I hope. I really do. Until then, bye for now. And as Ra used to say, follow your strategy and authority and love yourself.